Well, Uncle Dan,
Well, hello.
when I was younger and I was in elementary school, I think maybe junior high school, I read the quote by Lincoln about the better angles of our character, and I never heard it spoken out loud. So for several years, I was left trying to figure out what exactly that meant.
Well, you got the one under your arm, and then the elbow one.
Well,
And
I just assume that whatever angle you have, you want to make sure it's a right one.
Yeah, it was. He was very into 90 degrees for some reason.
Yeah.
But I think Uncle Mark has something to talk about the not so great angles of our nature.
These are not the great angles. These are not the better angles of our nature, let me tell you. So, we try to have some fun on the show, guys. We try to laugh at the absurd and silly every chance we get, and that's great. But sometimes when you set out to make a podcast about the comedic side of cults and craziness, the cults and craziness outweighs the comedy just a little bit. And while there is some funny stuff about today's very peculiar subject, there is some very, very not funny stuff about it as well. So let's laugh and then let's not for a while. Content warning, there are references to sexual violence and sexual violence against children in this segment.
So help me. If this is another anthill thing, I am leaving the podcast.
It feels like it's going to go that way, but it doesn't go all the way there. So,
okay.
Yeah. So it's not graphic descriptions like it was with the Anthill Kids. It's just the mention of it. So, but it's kind of impossible to tell the story without it. So be warned. So we've talked before on the show about the Satanic Panic, that not really over nationwide hysteria of the 1980s and 90s that drove this idiot country. Well, that one, I'm not there at the moment. I'm in Canada, out of its uptight mind and saw masses of false accusations, arrests, imprisonments, and other assorted bullshit. For a primer on it, please refer back to episode 23. Well, the sort of Satanists that actually rape, kidnap, and murder people at random that were the shadowy villains for this decades-long cultural nightmare didn't really exist. Put a pin in that for just a minute. The Satanists that were around were mostly adherents and imitators of the Church of Satan, the brainchild of the hard-to-take seriously Anton LaVey. The Church of Satan was really and still is just another expression of 60s counterculture and rejection of the stuffy, conservative, stifling American culture that preceded it. The Church of Satan is mostly a hedonistic movement of pure individuality, inspired by, among others, the works of Ayn Rand. You can listen to Doug's segment on her. What a wonderful person she was in episode 90. And while many accuse them of being kind of sexist and pricks online, they aren't kidnapping anyone's babies for human sacrifices in the forest. That's not who they are.
Right.
And more recently, of course, most people will be familiar with the Satanic Temple, featured in last year's wonderful documentary, Hail Satan, and co-founded by Lucien Greaves, whom we spoke to in episode 16. Lucien and the Satanic Temple are the farthest thing from the murderous cannibals haunting the long, dark American night of the 1980s. They are, in fact, merry pranksters and First Amendment heroes, rather haunting Southern and square state legislatures with their truck-mounted Baphomet statue, trying to fend off the worst excesses of creeping Christian nationalism.
Yeah.
Child murdering bad guys, they are certainly not.
That we know about.
That we know, Lucien. You've been served. You're on blast.
Keep it tight, Lucien.
They've used our outrageous religious presumptions in this country as an act of judo against those who ceaselessly abuse it. So well played, the Satanic Temple. Well, remember when I said those B-movie satanic warlocks who kill and rape at random didn't exist? Well, it turns out they kind of do. And just to gild the devil's lily, they are also ardent, madly violent Nazis. Isn't that fun, guys? Oh, nice.
Well, you had me at ardent, madly violent Nazis.
So today we pay a visit to the satanics that should cause some panics, the Order of Nine Angles, or the O9A if you're nasty. The Order of Nine Angles is a pretty weird little outfit for a variety of reasons. The semi-mysterious people that have authored its literature and occasionally spoken for it have purposefully surrounded it in loads of mystery and autobiographical legend. Alleged to have been founded in the late 60s by an unnamed woman in the west of England when she brought together 3 separate satanic temples and covens. In the early 70s, a man who called himself Anton Long joined, and in short order had risen through its ranks, those being neophyte, initiate, external adept, internal adept, master, grandmaster, and immortal, to become its master. Long handwrote thousands of pages laying out the philosophy and magical, with a K, practices, defining the order as a highly secretive, left-hand path practice to reach the gods of the acausal realm. It's amorphous, anarchistic, and totally decentralized. They follow what's called the pathai-mathos, the path of suffering, to come to know themselves, to become masters of the causal realm, and eventually masters of the acausal realm as well. I shall explain below. It wasn't really until the 1980s that the O9A really even made itself known by publishing articles in already existing occultist and far-right nationalist magazines. It also began distributing its founding scriptures, most notably the Black Book of Satan, and its own magazine, Fenrir, named for the fearsome wolf of Norse mythology. Much of the literature was written by Anton Long, and an artist and musician who went by Christos Beast, but has been identified as Richard Molt. I should also note that most scholars and journalists who've studied O9A, far more than I have, identify Anton Long as a very fascinating and peculiar man whose real name is David Myatt. Some disagree, including Myatt himself, who vehemently denies any association with the O9A, going so far as to challenge a journalist who said he was to a duel with a Nazi dagger.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like someone from the O9A would.
I mean, that's just
exactly.
He protesteth too little. But the preponderance of evidence seems to support it is, in fact, Myatt. But we'll call him Anton Long for the most part in here. Unlike the Church of Satan or the Satanic Temple, the Order of Nine Angles very much believe in the theistic evil god Satan, and with him a pantheon of so-called dark gods, including a sinisterly female version of Baphomet, who in their version looks very much like the Hindu god of destruction, Kali, who will bring about a violent revolution that allows for a new system of racially superior tribal warlord governments called the Imperium, and that golden age of hellish violence and total destruction of the former Magian Nazarene, as they call it, basically their term for Judeo-Christian, of the Magian Nazarene order that has enfeebled and poisoned the natural violence of the human spirit, preventing our ascendancy to Ubermensch, and then in this Mad Max version of the future will set out to conquer and colonize the galaxy, led by the Dark Lord, the Dark God Vindex, into a neo-pagan, Hitlerian, interstellar satanic eternity. You had me at Vindex. Where do I sign? Huh?
Right.
That was quite a sentence.
That's a lot.
Yeah. I was trying to distill it down to the essence, and I think I got there. So
I think so. I didn't understand any of what you said, but I think you nailed it.
So the O9A believes there have been 5 aeons of man, each one lasting around 2,000 years. The primal, the Hyperborean. For some more wholesome Nazi content, check out our segment on Hyperborea in episode 148. The Sumerian, the Hellenistic, and the current one, the Western. Each aeon ends in a few hundred years of increased authoritarianism and militarism, and this aeon's period of dictatorship, they predict, will begin sometime between 1990 and 2011 and will last until 2390, so any minute 10 years ago now.
Right.
At that point, we'll commence.
I mean, up until this year, it seems like they kind of had a guy.
Here. He figures very, very prominentely with a lot of these neo-Nazi satanic people. Yeah. Like Trump really, they saw as the guy, which should come as no surprise. So at that point, we'll commence the 6th great age, the Aeon of Fire. Their own new satanic timescale begins in the year 1889, the birth year of a middling watercolorist turned eager European real estate tycoon Adolf Hitler. They have praised Hitler's Reich as, quote, a practical expression of satanic spirit, a burst of Luciferian light, of zest and power in an otherwise Nazarene, pacified, and boring world.
Boy, I never thought I would hear the word zesty applied to the Third Reich.
Yeah, just kind of citrusy.
Also, Nazarene being used as like pussified or whatever is an interesting phrasing.
Yeah, the Magian Nazarene, it just weakened us. It made us all feeble. And yet, weirdly, for Jew-hating, hyper-violent racists, they are adamant in their Holocaust denial, saying it was a myth constructed by the Magian Nazarene world order to denigrate the Nazis and therefore discredit them. It's so weird to me how some of the most rabid neo-Nazis who foment for another Holocaust feel the need to deny the actual one.
Yeah, I know. It's so crazy.
So people in occult circles used to joke about the Order of the Nine Angles of Nine Angles as the Order of No Members, which is funny and true because they maybe had a dozen members for a decade or more. Some people think as few as 5. But this gets to part of what is so different about them. They weren't really looking for any, not in the normal cult sense. They flew almost entirely under the radar. Other than Myatt / Anton Long, they really have no leader. Pretty much all their literature is available for free. They don't want money. They don't want to meet you, etc. They may be the most uncult-like cult I've ever studied.
Huh.
So remember when we had my friend, former undercover FBI agent Greg Rogers on the show in episode 154, when Dan talked to him about Operation Underground Railroad and all the bullshit around human trafficking myths. We remember our secret agent man. Well, in his career at the Bureau, one of his beats was taking down American neo-Nazis. And he took down a lot of them. And I asked him how he could keep doing it again and again, and they never got wise to it. He said it was because A, they were fucking stupid, and B, they were so preoccupied with taking power over whatever small group they were in, so bitterly hateful of all the other groups, and so consumed with infighting, they never thought to make a website where they could post all the pictures of the feds that were taking them down.
Right.
Right. I couldn't believe they weren't comparing notes. And he said they hate each other.
Yeah.
The order of Nine Angles seems totally immune to any of that. There's no leadership to usurp. There's no money to embezzle. There's no power to be had by taking control.
In other words, they're just boring.
Well, they're not boring, that's for sure. Cult expert Steve Hassan says the motivation behind cults is always some combination of money, sex, and power, right? But none of that really exists here. It's really kind of a free, open source, radical ideology concocted by true believers and just left out on the dusky edge of society's view for anyone to find.
Fucking hippies.
According to O9A's own FAQ page on their ancient WordPress website, I did promise a little bit of comedy here. When one finds their literature, one should do what they want with it. If they want to become a member, they don't even really have membership. So if they want to become associated, great. That's what they call them. People who are connected to them are just associates.
Right.
Right. It's like gig Satanism. But you're free to interpret it your own way, or even start your own temple known as a Nexion, or not. It's up to you, right? And when you do that, there's no fees. You don't have to buy anything. It's very strange. So, should you decide to actually live by the group's what they call sevenfold way, who initiates you? Well, you do, dummy. And it's rather fucking intense. One of the easiest initiation rituals is finding a secluded wild spot and laying there for an entire night without sleeping or even moving. Okay, most people could probably do that. Another is to live in the wilderness with zero contact with anyone else for 6 months. The ritual of the
we've all seen the show Alone.
Yeah.
I don't think it's going to happen for most people.
Right. The ritual of the abyss has one living totally alone again, this time in the depths of a cave for a month.
Where are you finding these caves?
I don't. They're hereabout. Another is to walk alone over rough terrain, covering 300 miles in just 15 days, which is 20 miles a day, which is
That's doable.
pretty substantial for 2 weeks.
At the end of all this, do you get your Nazi merit badge?
Well, here's the other thing that's really fascinating about it is nobody checks up on this. They have this dedication to this radical self-honesty, right? And if you didn't do it, you failed, and that's enough, right? It's really fascinating. So this is some next level commitment. And all you have to do to become a Mormon is have the bad luck of turning 8 in casserole country, right?
Right.
So it gets even more intense. Once you've passed those hermetic mind-breaking tests, you're ready for what they call an insight roll. That means doing something so outside any experience you've ever had or joining a group you never would have considered for at least 6 and up to 18 months. It could be joining the police or the military, traveling around the world on foot without $1 and begging and stealing to do it, joining ISIS, seriously, normal gap year kind of things.
Yeah, this sounds a lot like Batman Begins. I feel like
a little bit.
It kind of does.
It's like this evil kind of samurai coda, right? It's highly disciplined.
Also, it's starting to make a lot of sense that they had no members. That part's starting to make way more sense to me.
Very few people can pass through these crucibles, right?
Or would want to,
but some do. So getting comfortable with violence and weapons training, etc., is pretty normal neo-Nazi fare. But specifically for the Order of Nine Angles, it serves a purpose called culling. Specifically culling of Opfers, which is the German word for victims.
Oh.
Part of the rite of passage and self-development for someone following the O9A path is ritually ridding the species of unworthy garbage. This is literally part of their doctrine, as laid out in several publications, including A Guide to Human Sacrifice.
Oh, my God.
Culling, A Guide to Sacrifice Part 2, and Victims, A Sinister Expose, and Guidelines for Testing of Opfers. You see, these guys aren't just nihilists. Say what you will about the tenets of National Socialism, dude. At least it's an ethos.
Right.
And an Opfer must, quote, self-select.
What?
They don't know that they're being tested, but they are being watched. And when an Opfer is culled, not only is the species less filthy, but in many cannibal cultures, the murderer inherits the life force of the victim, bringing them closer to being the idyllic Übermensch, the Nietzschean Übermensch.
No, this is not okay. Nothing that's happening is okay.
No, and it doesn't get better. and more than a few targeted Opfers have indeed been culled, meaning fucking murdered by Order of Nine Angles initiates. More on that in a tick. In preparation for this segment, I read many articles, and one very interesting one just on neo-fascists generally in the online journal Bellingcat.com by Robert Evans. He has an excellent quote here that could apply to so many of the segments we do about this stuff. I should note that one of the more frustrating elements about covering the fascist right is that much of what they say sounds ridiculous and makes them appear less than serious. This is why it is important to remember that these groups have a body count and represent a real threat. Their absurdity does not negate their danger. And there is some silly shit about the Order of Nine Angles, like the fact they can't or won't get their story straight about how they got their name, or that one of their most important rituals is a board game called the Game of Stars. They think of it as something like the Lament Cube from Hellraiser, like a puzzle that opens up the membrane between the causal world and the acausal world, where the dark gods live. But you'll laugh if you see it because it's exactly Spock's multi-level chessboard from the old Star Trek series, right? Haha, silly, but these people are deadly fucking serious.
Right.
The goal of O9A is chaos, pandemonium, rape, murder, criminality, and the total implosion of the Magian Nazarene order to bring about the Aeon of Fire. To quote from an official O9A publication, 2 acts of assault are most commonly recommended: lynching and sexual assault.
Jesus.
They ardently encourage rape as terrorism. They are also 100% pro-violent pedophilia. Again, as a vehicle not only for terror and chaos, but an assertion of the superior will of an O9A associate to dominate the weak and the useless.
My God.
Oh, yeah.
Weak and the useless meaning children.
Children, of course.
They are weak and often useless. So
in another publication, it says children must never be cold. So they have, guys, they have ethics. They don't kill children.
Well, that's good to know.
They just believe they can be raped at will.
Right. Well, they are pretty weak, so obviously.
The founder of the main U.S. Order of Nine Angles, Nexion, called the Temple of Blood, of is O-V, is a guy named Joshua Caleb Sutter, who is a real peach. In addition to fashioning himself as a hyper-pro North Korean propagandist, among a few other daffy things, he was actually contacted apparently by North Korean intelligence, and they were working with him. And at some point, they decided he's just too fucked in the head. Like the North Koreans are like, nope, can't do business with this guy.
Yeah.
Among a few other daffy things, he wrote a bit of A90 Nazi fanfic called Iron Gates. It's horrific both in vision and grammar. Suffice it to say, it paints a sloppy but nightmarish John McNaughton-style portrait of the future the Order of Nine Angles wishes to foment. Mass murder of the Untermensch and endless days of child rape and torture in service of the triumph of mediocre white men. This hellacious future has become an inspiration to the violent American neo-fascist paramilitary, the Atomwaffen Division, whose rallying cry is Iron Gates now. Right. So that's the future they want.
Okay.
Horrific, of course. Stupid, without question. But it has ignited the passions of more than a few hyper-violent, dumb motherfuckers everywhere. Here in America, we have a lot of violent neo-Nazi movements. Most, like my friend Greg said, are fucking idiots who are more likely to blow their own brains out by mistake than they are to hurt anyone else, but some are not. Here's some of the crimes. Anton Long's A90 text inspired David Copeland to place several nail bombs around areas in London frequented by gay and immigrant communities in 1999. His nail bombs killed 3 people and injured 140 others.
Wow.
The British anti-fascist group Hope Not Hate records at least 6 O9A associates being prosecuted for terrorism in 2020 alone. Here in Toronto, an associate of the order, quote, culled 2 South Asian men who had nothing to do with anything by stabbing them in the throats. In the States, order devotee Jared William Smith, an Army specialist, was charged with leaking classified material on high explosives and weapons of mass destruction in order to kill federal agents for, quote, the glory of his satanic religion. Another U.S. soldier, Ethan Melzer, stationed at a U.S. base in Italy, passed on information to help O9A members and an affiliated group called the Rapewaffen Division, who are exactly as they sound,
God,
to ambush and kill as many of his fellow soldiers as possible. Luckily, the plot was stopped. He's facing life in prison. His arrest exposed other order associates within the military, including one stationed in Kuwait, and one in the National Guard who intended to use his presence at the George Floyd protests this last summer to start a satanic racial holy war. By a crazy piece of luck, he was apprehended before he could start shooting. He was also a member of the O9A affiliated Rapewaffen Division that I mentioned, a terror group hell-bent on using rape as a weapon. There are several more known cases of murder and attempted murder and terrorism connected to the Order of Nine Angles and groups they have major influence over, like the Atomwaffen Division, National Action, the Sonnenkrieg Division, and the Nordic Resistance Movement. Now, as the order is declaredly not only pro-human sacrifice, pro-rape, and pro-sexual violence directed at children, you may have correctly surmised that when one of the O9A is run to ground by the authorities, they are very likely to be in possession of a lot of images of child pornography and child rape. No need to dwell any further on that, but it seems to be standard equipment for apprehended O9A associates, including a teenager who is the youngest person ever charged with terrorism in the UK. I think he was 15.
Wow.
So what of their semi-leadership? Richard Molt, a.k.a. Christos Beast, went underground for several years and seems to have denounced the group. He was living as a Catholic in a rural part of England, and it wasn't until he resurfaced as a fairly prominent folk musician that his past was rediscovered by his bandmates who kicked him to the curb. Although having sworn off his past, he seems once again to be active in the order. And what about David Myatt, a.k.a. Anton Long, very likely the actual originator of the order? As I mentioned at the top, he's a fascinating figure. In addition to kicking the lid off this nightmare, he's a classical Greek scholar, has lived all over the world, lived for a time as both a Christian and a Buddhist monk, and in the 2000s converted to Islam, moved to the Middle East, and in fluent Arabic became the West's most ardent spokesperson for and advocate of Osama bin Laden, and called for total jihad against the decadent Magian Nazarene order of the West. He's lived a hell of a life, guys.
I was going to say that sounds like three completely misspent evil lifetimes. But
he's a horrible human being, but he's also incredibly fascinating and not an idiot. He spent 10 years doing this before renouncing Islam and moving home to rural England as well, where he apparently still lives and perhaps still quietly guides the Order of Nine Angles from his keyboard. Many people think his time in Islam was just another of his many insight roles, infiltrating a group in order to raise one's awareness and possibly destroy it from within. This may also have been the motivation for Richard Molt's renunciation of the order, his conversion to Catholicism, and his time in the folk scene. But in either case, these men seem to be still at large, now in their later years, and despite having unleashed a methodology for very disturbed and disordered minds everywhere to become the worst versions of themselves, they seem unmolested by the police, which is baffling to me.
Well, except that what four members there are all in the police now.
Well, that's the thing, is they think that there's different levels of association with the order, and you kind of choose, and they have names. There's artists who can be associated with it. There's street gangs. There's individual black magicians that can have different associations with it. And there's a lot of worry about how infiltrated they are into the military and police forces in the United States, Canada, and Germany, at least. So they're the best guesstimates that these anti-fascist groups make is there might be 2,000 of them in the world. But that seems like a couple thousand too many.
Yeah, most definitely.
So it's a really fascinating, horrible, evil, truly, truly evil, but very fascinating group of people, right? And
I've never heard of them. Never at all.
American law enforcement has only recently become even aware of them.
Wow.
They have managed to keep themselves in the shadows so successfully. And you know what one of the journalists I read was talking about is they don't, if you come across an Order of Nine Angles member, he's not going to tell you who he is. Right. It's just a secret order.
First rule of Fight Club.
Yeah, they're not the sloppy ass stupid skinheads, right? They're a whole different level of discipline.
They're the not proud boys.
Yeah. So really fascinating. But how about that?
Great. I'll sleep well. I'm going to sleep great tonight. Thank you.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks for that. And with that, let's move on.